Folks. Thanks for attending our third University Staff Council Forum this year. My name is Christina Ballard, and I have the honor of serving as your current USC chairperson. A quick rundown on what the USC is, and if you've attended the other two virtual forums, you know what's coming. Quick plug. The USC is made up of nearly 50 individuals, both voting and non-voting members, who make up our council. Staff under the office of the president, as well as some of our system families, are represented. We sit on task forces and external committees. We address issues brought to our attention through simply emailing staff@tmu.edu. We oversee the Staff Emergency Fund, which awards money to those going through temporary hardships. And we take action to improve the staff environment and experience. So in short, we're staff voice. And if you want more information on who we are, please visit staff.tmu.edu. So some quick rules of engagement for today's panel. Please put your questions in the Q&A box, and you can definitely choose to be anonymous or not. Our amazing behind the scenes staff will get those questions put into the queue. If we don't get to your question today, don't worry, we'll make sure to post answers on our website along with the recording of today's forum. Look for an email about that soon. Lastly, there will be a survey pop-up when you click leave meeting. Please take a moment to share your thoughts with us so that we can continue to improve. So on to our panelists. You may have signed up for this under the impression that it was just President M. Katherine Banks, but little did you know, as an added bonus, we have with us Dr. Greg Hartman, Chief Operations Officer, Damon Slaydon, our Interim VP of HRO, and returning to our panel because he just can't seem to get enough of us, Dr. Mark Weichold, our Interim Provost. So now, without further ado, I'm going to stop talking and turn this over to President Banks.
Hello, good morning. It's been such a pleasure to step into this role as president and working with this group of individuals, but also throughout campus over the past 2.5 months. I'm very excited to be able to meet all of you in the future. I can talk a bit about vision, or our quest for vision to get started. And we noticed on the question list that we had that we were able to clump some of the questions together, and those areas will be answered by 4 individuals who are here today. So in terms of what I've done over the past 2.5 months and the plan for the future, we are working together to develop a very clear, concrete plan for taking this university to next levels. The first step was to visit all the colleges and the college leadership. So I have visited each college and met with the dean as well as the leadership within the college to discuss opportunities, concerns, challenges, and allow for us to take that information and build it into our strategic plan as we move forward this fall. Secondly, we have employed MGT, which is a higher ed consultancy company, to help us develop a list of ideas and planning that could possibly align with a set of principles to move forward relatively quickly in the fall semester. I anticipate receiving the MGT report by the end of September, and hopefully we'll be talking with each of you about how to implement some or all of the suggestions underneath a framework of principles or agreed items in the future. So at this point, I am developing a vision based on information, feedback, and discussion from the campus community. This is our vision, and we'll be discussing it as such as soon as the MGT report is released, and I have the opportunity to visit with all of you as soon as we have a clear framework for discussion. So basically hold your horses until this fall in October, when we have a clear path forward based on the MGT results. So hopefully that provides a framework to answer the question that you posted about the vision for the future. And if it's okay, Christina, I could pass it on to the other four gentlemen here. And CJ Wood is also here, who is the Chief of Staff, to address some of the areas where questions were submitted. So I'll pass it on to Greg Hartman, who is the Chief Operating Officer.
Okay, thanks.
I feel like it's important to just dive into COVID-19, which would be your area. Dr. we had an overwhelming amount of questions regarding safety and COVID-19, and I think we supplied you with a great deal. So please go ahead.
So Christina, let me do just a quick kind of rundown on what the COVID-19 guidance is up to this point and what we're thinking about. And then obviously I know from looking at the list and there's lots of questions, and we'll answer all those quickly. You know, we work real closely with the system, of course, the Office of General Counsel, the Regents, everyone as well too, to develop the guidance that Dr. Banks put out. Basically, it's a few key parts. One is mandatory testing, which starts as of the 23rd and will go through September 10th. And we've built up the capacity to provide testing for every student and all staff during that period of time. And it is mandatory, as you saw in the guidance probably. We'll continue to make sure testing is readily available throughout the entire system, throughout the entire semester. And there'll be plenty of locations and all those kind of things as well too, to keep doing testing. But the mandatory window, the only mandatory window defined so far is that one period that we're talking about that we've just entered. We've also got the vaccine incentive program that you've probably heard about. Students we're going to give away roughly the equivalent of 5 one-year scholarships that'll be awarded in a drawing for everyone who submits their vaccination information. And then staff and faculty as well will have a drawing. We're still finalizing some of the prizes there, so still a little bit more to come on those, but there will be some significant prizes for staff and faculty as well too. And then of course we're having mandatory reporting. So if someone is a positive or is a close contact, we're asking for everyone to report so we can continue to do case investigations, help people who have questions after they've either had a positive COVID test or they feel that they were a close encounter, to help folks know how to manage that process. We're also going to be doing lots of other monitoring, like wastewater monitoring like we had last time. We're continuing to do high volume airflows when we can through buildings in order to improve or lessen the chances of COVID infection in certain buildings. We're going to continue to do all the kind of things that we did last time. So I think I'll stop there, and I know there's going to be lots of questions, and probably the best way to get to a lot of the COVID stuff is to answer a lot of the questions at some point.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate you reminding us all about the testing and the incentives programs. One of the main questions that have come in are regarding any anticipation of possibly going back to home and remote work and learning as COVID might surge and continue to surge. Additionally, considering that our ICUs are reporting being overwhelmed already.
Yeah, we're meeting on a weekly basis. Dr. Weichold, myself, and a group of about 15, 16 folks from across the campus. Damon, Slaydon, who's here from HR, he and his staff meet with us as well too, and folks from the School of Public Health to help us monitor this. At some point, you know, that may become required, but at this point though, you know, direction from the system that we've had so far is that we are still anticipating in-person classes. Hopefully throughout the entire semester. We'll have to see, you know, how things work, obviously, and if situations change dramatically. But up to this point, though, we're still expecting in-person classes. Now, we do have allowance where if a faculty member has a positive test, he or she can actually teach the class remotely as long as there's a TA available to help assisting in the class. We have allowed, Dr. Weichold's office is going to be putting out information that's going to allow virtual advising, which is something that most of our advising has gone to anyway up to this point. So there's some specific cases that we'll be allowing to, but in terms of overall in virtual classes, that's not happening right now. That's not approved up to this point.
Additionally, we had questions regarding masks being required or the recently approved FDA or the recently approved vaccine by the FDA. If the COVID-19 Delta variant has proven to continue to be highly contagious among our highly at-risk staff members.
Yeah, again, masks are voluntary. We're not allowed to do mandatory testing. We do have a, direct reporting line to the governor through our board of regents, and the governor has put out an order that doesn't allow mandatory masking. We're encouraging masking. We're putting signage up everywhere, encouraging masking, explaining how important it is. But again, at this point, though, as a state public university, we're not allowed to make mask wearing mandatory.
Thank you. Moving from kind of our COVID safety to AWL, we had a great deal of questions around this topic as well, whether AWL will be approved at a higher volume considering those who are at risk or who are caring for a member who's at risk at home.
AWL, again, continues to be the definition that it's been for a while, or that it's always been. People can put in requests, and obviously the situations, it's hard to define exactly what'll be approved depending on one particular instance or whatever. So they'll all be reviewed, but in terms of large scale AWL based on COVID at this time, that's not allowed. Now there might be special circumstances or whatever where that may come into play, but right now, large scale AWL based on COVID situations we're at our regular AWL policy right now, a regular process for that.
There is, though, a medical condition type AWL out there. Is that correct?
Yeah, and Damon, you may have some more specifics on that too. There are some specifics depending on the situations where AWL is allowed.
You want to say something?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. Basically, as Greg mentioned, the same rules, SAPs are in place that have been pre-COVID. I think what may have changed throughout the response to the pandemic is the delegations of authority, which has allowed more flexibility and ease some administrative burden. However, to ensure that we're doing things equitably across all staff lines, we want to make sure that any requests that are specific to a medical need, that those follow the proper protocol and be handled through our employee relations team. And each of those would be necessary to be documented with appropriate medical documentation. And then we can be responsive and go over options that may be most suitable for the employee, as well as the manager and team that support that individual.
So we had, just filtering through some of the new incoming questions, there's a question that says, I'd love to hear from President Banks regarding the ongoing pandemic and how the university is going to function safely once 50 or 60,000 students return to BCS from all over the country or even the world.
Well, obviously we have plans in place that are in place to actually protect our faculty, staff, and students. But Mark, I think I'll ask you to talk a little bit about the academic side of our COVID response.
Okay. As Mr. Hartman was saying, we are guided by the direction we received from the Chancellor and from the Board of Regents. And so we're gearing up for a return to face-to-face classes this fall. The testing that we're going to be engaging in starting today and for the next 3 weeks should provide us with some insights as to what we could expect in terms of the number of cases, number of close contacts, and that sort of thing. But I do want to point out, it's a common misconception, I think, that we're watching only 1 or 2 or 3 metrics in making these decisions. We are committed to in-person experience this fall, but if the conditions change and we're monitoring those very carefully, we are prepared to make those changes. The things that you see on the 6 o'clock news are always sort of pointed at first in terms of the percentage of or the number of ICU beds that are available, positivity rates, those sorts of things. We are not focusing on any one of those, but looking at probably close to 20 different metrics in a holistic way. And we're prepared to move in the direction that's dictated by those metrics when the time comes. We are trying to make our classrooms, laboratories, and everything as safe as we can. The plexiglass shields that were installed, for instance, last year will once again be present. The higher exchange of air in a given classroom or laboratory, that airflow rate will continue to be greater than pre-COVID times. We'll have the signage, of course, that Mr. Hartman mentioned all over the campus. For faculty office hours, we're trying to be as accommodating as we can, making it possible for office hours to be conducted online as well as in person. And if a faculty member feels more comfortable or an advisor feels more comfortable doing an in-person advising session or office hour session in a larger environment, we'll do our best to make conference rooms and those sorts of things available as well. We are not going to have the luxury of the distancing that we had last year, being that our classrooms are going to be fully occupied by students. We could probably have occupancy levels of 80, 85, 90%, maybe 100% in some cases. And so the distancing just is not going to be possible at this time. But I think we've got a good handle on the metrics. We're watching those literally day by day and are prepared to go into the fall with the utmost optimism, but at the same time prepared to make whatever changes that the conditions demand of us at a given time.
Thank you. We have some more follow-up questions regarding the university's AWL policy. If I can jump back onto that and its relation to COVID and work from home. Is the university going to update its guidance such that TAMU employees can work from home without an overwhelming amount of approvals through HR and TAMU leadership?
Yeah, thank you, Christina. I believe as we have been responsive in our current status of being forced to work remotely, what we weren't allowed to do is really take an assessment of the students, the staff, the faculty, our customers, and how their need of being back on campus and need to be serviced would relate to our ability to be remote and still provide that same level of service that's expected from our customers. So what we're doing is taking information that's been made available to us throughout this pandemic. And Dr. Weichold has a team that he's assembled, and I think you, as well as other members of the staff council, have participated in that endeavor. Whereas this working group will be able to develop a lessons learned type document. We can assess that, and then sometime in the future, look at it as a tool whereby we can meet business needs, but also look at work-life balance needs so that we can maintain being the preferred employer of this whole area. And that is a growing factor that I think employees are looking to. And we want to address that because I feel like our workforce can be productive if it's handled appropriately, but we also want to make sure that it's done equitably. So while we have been responsive to needs based on the pandemic, we're looking to fulfill the needs of our business as well as our employees and launch a plan that's suitable for all. And it's based on someone's job requirements, but also their responsiveness to our customers whom we're here to serve.
Christina, if I may, I'd like to follow a little bit of what Damon was saying about the lessons learned task force that you co-chaired. I don't know if the USC broadly is aware of this, but Christina and Dr. Andrew Klein co-chaired a group, for lack of a better word, called Lessons Learned Task Force. But the idea was to look at those things that we've been doing in the last 18 months and figure out what worked well and work well enough to where it might become part of our campus culture here. And it might be business practices, it might be academic things, it might be who knows what, but we want to try to find that silver lining in what otherwise is a pretty gloomy cloud. Just so everybody's aware, Christina and Dr. Klein did share a draft with me last week. We're vetting it around to share some feedback with them and expect to get the final form of that report very soon. We'll look at that in final form, and I don't anticipate making big wholesale changes this fall because frankly, we have a lot of other things on our to-do list in terms of getting back to school and everything. But once we get past the fall semester, some of the things like AWL, advising online, teaching online, those sorts of things can be addressed. And we'll just see where we want to take this in calmer times. But I do want to say how much we appreciate Christina representing University Staff Council and producing this excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we had some follow-up questions regarding the, Dr. Banks, you mentioned that the report would be ready about our equity and just our campus look over toward the end of September. Someone asked, does that mean the hiring freeze is in place through the end of September?
We determined that September 1st would be the day where we would end the hiring freeze as it is now. However, we are debating additional approvals for the creation of positions. We're not sure where we'll go with that, but right now, September 1st is the target date for that particular hiring freeze. And I just want to make a point that it is fairly common that new administrations put in place hiring freezes for the first 90 days. And that's exactly what we did to determine really the status of the campus. With all the changes with COVID, the new administration is important to get a foundation, understand what is going on throughout campus before you jump into the fall semester and make any other types of alterations. So anyway, that's, I think that answers that question.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Weichold, I believe this one is for you. Is there an opportunity for seminar courses with 300 students to be taught remotely?
At this point, our model going into the fall semester is that unless a course has been already approved for a non-traditional format delivery, our expectation is that they're going to be done in a face-to-face environment. Whether it's 30 students or 300 students, that's our expectation. Now, like I said, if the department of the college went through the non-traditional format approval process months ago, that's in place. We've been trying to make judicious use of those courses and assign faculty to teach in those courses that might have immunocompromised people at home or something like that. That's a small number of the courses and sections that we're going to be offering. So the short answer to the question is a 300-person seminar is expected to be taught in person.
This one is on EPSL. So Damon, I might be bunting to you. With the rise in COVID cases, will the EPSL be extended, emergency paid sick leave, sorry, acronyms at A&M. Will it be extended to the fall semester? The mandated requirement for COVID testing implemented to the colleges, what laws or regulations permit these actions to take place?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Christina. The Americans Rescue Plan Act was one that established our ability to have this Families First Coronavirus Recovery Act. All of those different types of acts empowered us and gave us the provisions whereby we could provide our staff some options. Currently, the extended paid sick leave program will run through the end of September. That is something that we're aware of and monitoring any updates to that legislation that may extend it. But currently, the 10 working days is available for those that meet those 9 specific criteria. The information is available on our website that then they would qualify for, can apply for, and then we would look to that to apply that through the end of September 2021, unless legislation extends that opportunity.
I'm going to move us on to the next topic unless I see an overwhelming amount of COVID questions continue to come in. They might. I apologize. I have to scroll through about, I think we're at 130 questions almost. Let's see. That's a great question. What is the projected timeline for this lessons learned task force and the creation of the document just mentioned for widespread review and implementation?
Well, I expect that the task force is going to be sharing the final version of the report within the next 10 days or so. Then my plan would be to parse those recommendations, observations to various groups on campus and see what works best in a given area. I think some may find some level of implementation as early as this fall, but I would bet the vast majority of those recommendations coming out of lessons learned are going to find implementation in the spring semester.
Will communication be sent out that pre-COVID AWL is no longer approved and everyone is to return to work 100%? I feel that might have already been done, but Damon, do you have more to add to that?
I will address that with our team. I know that our expectation is that folks have returned to on-site employment. There may have been some requests that were submitted. My understanding was that those were to expire as of a certain date. And we should plan for returning back to work on site, and then any modifications that would need to be requested through the normal protocol.
We hear a lot of talk about support for faculty while navigating COVID this semester, such as virtual office hours. Can you talk about how we're supporting and being flexible with our non-faculty staff? If the hope is to be equitable, I'd like to hear what the processes are outside of the classroom.
I think I'll take a first shot at that. I think it's several of the items we talked about that we're able to do, given the guidance from the system, the Board of Regents, and most importantly, the governor, since he's put out some very specific guidelines on this. It is the mandatory testing window, having vaccines and testing available, very available on campus. We'll continue to do that and continue to stress that, incentivizing vaccines, reminding people to mask, those kind of things. I basically think we're using every tool at our disposal right now to do everything we can to make it as safe as possible. And then there is the monitoring and the regular conversations we're having to see if things do begin to change even more significantly, working with the system to see if there's additional steps that we can take. So I think we're pretty much doing everything we can at this point, and we'll continue to look and see if there's other things we need to do, particularly if the spread of the virus continues to grow.
Damon, I'm seeing some more questions come in about AWL that's non-medical, non-COVID. It says, for example, you mentioned being competitive as an employer, so I think this is a good one to address again. Our IT unit is seeing a high turnover as many employees are leaving to work hybrid or full-time remote, and our leadership isn't offering flexibility. What's the timeline for having a new university-wide AWL process in place?
As soon as possible. We have to take in many considerations. Moving this organization so that we're not losing our footprint on service, and taking advantage of the skill sets that we have here already available to us. As soon as possible includes the assessment that Dr. Weichold and you've been working on. President Gates, sorry, Banks, that's Banks, right? President Banks.
3 years ago.
Yeah. I'm stuck back now. I'm just kidding. President Banks and Mr. Hartman, because there are a lot of overlapping decisions that would impact our ability to be responsive. We can't assume that everyone be working from home when there's an immediate need here. There are multi-tier decisions that need to go into this decision. It could be as early as next spring, but I can't promise you that. I want to make it as feasible as possible. There will be a lot of opportunities for us to work with the staff council on what this ideal scenario may be. We have to keep in our minds that we are here to support our customers, and that's students, that's faculty, that's staff, that's external parties. And in order to do that, we have to also understand that there's a commitment to excellence. And I don't want us to refrain from that obligation of excellence And by saying it's an immediate need, that's a personal need for me, whereas it may depend on other employees to be a backup or to do cross-training, other types of things. So we want to make this as easy as possible. Right now, we're in a response mode again, to where we may need to shift things. But again, that's based on the delegation of authority of the rules and SAPs that are already in place. This new plan will have to take into consideration our service models and accessibility. And I anticipate that we will continue to feverishly be working on that throughout this fall and hope to implement a plan as soon as feasible, maybe as early as next spring.
And if I could just add something, Christina, to that as well too, just from having worked with Damon and, you know, what I've been doing here, and even at the Health Science Center too, you know, one of the things, COVID clearly has changed our perception of some of this. And obviously we're having this meeting virtually here, and that's a reality now that has become more of a reality. If you look at the literature from business and from government, and I've talked to a lot of, you know, folks who specialize in things like office space and those kind of things, the sort of where does this land exactly, I think is still a little bit of a moving target. I mean, even some of the corporate entities that first announced, you know, mostly virtual are now starting to realize, okay, maybe that wasn't quite right. And it's probably gonna be somewhere between the two. There's probably specific positions that make a lot of sense to be virtual. Others make sense not to be virtual, and then some stuff in between. So I think to Damon's point too, to continue to study this, it's a good idea to let this thing settle down a little bit too, because I think if we jump to some conclusions, we may be doing some of the things that some of these corporate entities have done where they're now backing off a little bit. So I think it just helps us. Then in addition, we're dealing with COVID, but I think it's good to sort of let this play itself out a little bit more, continue to look at some best practices out there in both the government and corporate world, and then come up with a policy that's really gonna last a long time and takes advantage of the new realities that we've learned.
Certainly, in our task force, our findings sort of back that up, that we have various areas on campus that are, you know, chomping at the bit, if you will, to see AWL as a norm in their practice. But then there are a lot of areas that it said that they really didn't function well. Their office as a whole, maybe not a personal decision, but the office as a whole didn't function well. So I think while, you know, personally, I enjoyed the flexibility and the ability to do so, I do think that a one size fits all is not appropriate in this area.
Right.
Glad to hear that it's being looked at seriously. This is a hot topic as well, the status of staff merit increases for fiscal year 2022.
Those decisions for 22, fiscal year 22, which is this year or next year? Yeah, that's right. The year is always. I mean, we have moved forward with.
We're ready to go. We
this.
have the regions have to make one more decision.
Right.
Board of Regents have to.
That's true. There's a vote next week. Yeah. So
Next
I do
week.
believe we're in good shape, and we've I think filled the information into the system.
Yeah,
and
a lot has been preloaded now, so.
so I think it's just pushing a button at this point.
Well,
But we won't do that until the regents approve our budget.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm officially turning the page from COVID for now. We have so many questions coming in. I'm doing it, and if I get a lot of pushback in the Q&A, I'll know that I did wrong. But as the hiring freeze is anticipated for being lifted, what steps will there be taken to communicate to local departmental leadership to meet the needs and aspects to make up lost ground, and may hearten leadership to know that there are breaking points on campus for work-life balance due to such decisions?
So obviously, we've notified, I think, the administrative units on campus that September 1st, the freeze would be lifted. However, we are thinking about and talking with leaders across campus about the type of process that we want to put into place to ensure that the appropriate oversight and accountability is applied to new positions. At this point, the administrative leadership knows about the ending of the freeze on September 1st. So I assume they'll move forward quickly, the department heads, the directors, deans, et cetera, to fill open positions that are required to meet our mission. You want to say, you've been talking with some of the administrators, Greg has. So.
Yeah, I was gonna, and everything Dr. Banks says is right. I was gonna just point out too that, and I haven't looked at the numbers since last week, but well over 2/3 of all the requests have been approved that have been coming in. So even though we've had a freeze, we had exemptions for health and safety, specific academic needs, external funding or third source funding. Then we had kind of a miscellaneous bucket for those kind of things that needed to happen. And in doing that, Damon and I talk and his staff talk on almost a daily basis if necessary to look at those that need to be approved and keep moving. So there's actually been quite a few that have been approved. And I think, a lot of management has done a really good job of thinking hard about what to send up and have given the right justifications, which has made our job a little bit easier because it's usually pretty clear. So I think on September 1st, that may be loosened a little bit, although as Dr. Banks said, we're probably going to still need some sort of process in place. But I think we're moving along. We'll have to keep looking at where can we, maybe lighten up a little bit on certain things where it makes sense. But I think the term freeze has made a lot of people think everything was shut down. In reality, well over a majority, and I think over 2/3 of the positions have been approved. And so I think that'll continue to move forward and possibly grow a little bit too into the near future.
We had some follow-up questions related to, teams having to jump through incredible hoops to continue the work we're doing when when positions open up. And so just some suggestions on, what solutions can be offered until that September 1 constraint is lifted in order to, because of the freeze, staff hiring is halted, but also as the reward of staff going above and beyond to compensate for the lack of those team members.
I just want to say that there's still staff hiring. I think Greg mentioned that. I think over 50% of the requests have been approved. 2/3 of the requests were approved. So staff hiring has been ongoing continuously. So I don't want anyone to think that we've halted staff hiring. I think that we have to think very carefully about the type of people we hire and who we hire for what positions. And that's good business practice. And that's what we're moving forward with. It's not a freeze. It's just evaluating creation, filling the positions to determine whether that particular service is needed. You want to say a few words, Damon?
Yeah, I'd also say that our merit program is
right.
designed so that individuals can be recognized for extraordinary service in addition to their normal assigned functions. There's also the administrative leave with pay option where individuals can be recognized for 32 hours per fiscal year for extraordinary effort, for taking on additional roles, for special projects. Those are two methods right there that a supervisor has to his or her advantage that they can recognize these individuals for going above and beyond.
Thank you. A clarity question to clarify: fiscal year 2022, September 1 of 2021 approval will happen next week after the start of fiscal year 22. Is that?
That's right. The new fiscal year starts September 1st, this coming September 1st.
Okay.
2 days away.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, like almost.
Yeah, but Dr. Weichold just pointed the raises don't actually show up till October, assuming a positive board vote, which I think we probably do assume. They don't start till October though.
Okay.
They'll move forward at that point.
Till fiscal year 22.
My husband's an accountant, Dr. Banks. When he starts talking about fiscal years, I get a little
Very confusing.
This is a great question. The term work-life balance continues to appear in these questions and conversations. It seems that this is a priority for many employees. How do each of you make wellness a priority in your life?
Work is a priority. It's what puts beans on the table, so to speak. It also, at least in my household, it proves to my family that I'm willing to make extraordinary effort to provide for them every day with stability, but also be available for them for their activities, for their sporting events, for their school events. Our focus has been on, we do that normally after hours. During the pandemic, that shifted to where we could be available during normal hours. However, work is still a priority. And one of the guiding principles is that the monitoring, the evaluation, the ability to ensure that remote work is maintained at the same level of expectation as it is on site. That's one of the guiding principles. It's not that we don't trust individuals to not be working from home. I think the mindset is that we want to make sure that our peers, our supervisors, those that look to us as leaders in the workplace are provided that mentorship, and the work product is immediately available, and we're accessible to our customers.
I think I'll add too. I think two things that I'll say too. I worked in healthcare for a long time before I came to A&M, and we had the concept of self-care there all the time, that we were always stressing to our staff and our nurses and our doctors, which is just to make sure you're taking care of yourself, because you're a better employee when you're taking care of yourself and you're having time with your family, and you're, those emails can wait very often, even though sometimes we get the sense that we've got to clean out our mailbox every night. Sometimes it's okay to back away. So I think you just got to be smart about that, understand your situation, and realize that self-care is a very important piece of what you do, and you have to make those determinations. And if you're having a hard time doing that in your place, there needs to be a conversation with your supervisor or whoever else you need to raise that. The other thing I would say, just personally, because that was the way that you asked the question, to me, it motivates me a lot to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so when I hear the vision that Dr. Banks talks about, when I hear, the things that A&M is doing and some of the great work that we can do, and if we improve the ability, to make resources available, if we make smart decisions about what this university is going to do and make it a great university, there's just that motivation too. So I think you always have to know the why. And it's easy to sometimes forget that and think I'm just coming in and doing work. But, and everybody's got to figure out, are they challenged, or are they excited by the why? But I just think that's an important question to ask yourself all the time and see if that really matters. And if you understand that, if not, those are the questions you should be asking. Why am I doing this? What part of my job is helping for A&M to achieve greatness and to do this really significant new vision that we have for the university?
And I do believe that there are different needs in different points in your life. So discuss it with your supervisor if you have young children at home, or that you need time off to spend with family for one reason or another. I believe it's very important to be open and honest and direct about specific needs that you may have. My husband and I raised 6 children while we were working. I understand the challenges associated with being a parent, and having enough time with your family. But I do believe we as an institution, and certainly as supervisors, should be very open to discussing different options for employees that may be at a point in their life they need some flexibility. So I think that it's important for us all to remember. And I'd like to think, and I hope this campus is family friendly. That's how I would just have described the other units that I've worked in. So the goal would be a family friendly campus that would allow for this work-life balance to be appropriately implemented throughout our organization. I think we haven't heard from Mark. What does your work-life balance look like?
Oh, wow. I think I agree with what's been said before. I think there's a commitment that we've all made to Texas A&M University to do the jobs that we're hired to do. But the university, I think, also has made a commitment to us to ensure that we have a good personal life as well. And in my case, I enjoy things that are very far removed from the university. I've got a nice garden. I've got a little tractor I'm working on. Just things that get my mind completely away from the university jobs that I'm doing. I think it's healthy to engage in those sorts of things. I can't spend all of my week working on my old tractor, although I'd like to, but cognizant of how important having that personal time to spend doing things I like, doing things I would like to do with my family and so forth. And like I said, I think that we have a commitment to Texas A&M, but equally Texas A&M has a commitment to us to make sure that we are happy in all aspects of our employment here.
CJ, did you?
Sure. I like to think about that blend versus balance, because I understand that at certain points of the semester, I'm going to be busy. So I use my time wisely, and I pick my time wisely too to rejuvenate and recharge. You know, like the summer, we don't have as many students. We don't have 60,000+ students on our campus during the summer. So maybe that's a time for me to kind of step away, recharge, rejuvenate, and take advantage of the benefits that we do have by being employees in Texas A&M. So for me, it's, you know, using that time wisely. And also I wrote here, being flexible, accessible, and also understanding the peaks and valleys of our work. So for me, that has worked.
Awesome. Thank you all for chiming in on that question. That's great. Gives us a little insight into our university leadership over here. Dr. Weichold's a budding, well, almost semi-pro photographer too.
Yes, that's true.
He's just jealous. There's a question about relationships between staff and faculty that I feel is important to get in here because as staff council chairperson, this is brought up to us frequently, is the relationship between those two groups. And from that, we've already been talking with Faculty Senate about being more involved together on high-level initiatives. But it's directed to you, Dr. Banks. As the TAMU president, what advice would you have for the community, students, staff, and faculty to bring to your attention wasteful expenses that A&M is making toward faculty members who, for one reason or another, might not be fulfilling duties and responsibilities?
Well, certainly that's not acceptable and should be reported through the hotline that we have. You know the hotline number? I mean, it's listed on our website where we should, there's a website.
Ethics point.
It's Ethics Point, that's what it is.
Ethics Point.
Yeah.
Ethics Point on the website. I think it's on
Ethics
our
hotline, yeah.
website. So certainly I would suggest that individual contact or submit information to the Ethics Point and that we would investigate at that time. But I want to go back to your original comment about the relationship between faculty and staff, that we have to think of ourselves as a team. We're not defined by our job description. We work together as a team. I've seen units across campus who have been tremendously successful by building that attitude that we're all in this together and we all contribute in our unique ways, and there's not a hierarchy associated with our team. How does that develop? I believe it does through communication and through focusing on problem solving rather than a hierarchy associated with either degree or job description. So I would hope that the faculty recognize that and that our core value of respect is embraced by everyone. Now, I think that it would behoove us all to think about developing avenues for that communication. And perhaps with the faculty, Senate and your group as well, Christina, you could develop ideas where we could help. I could perhaps putting some money behind it to bring faculty and staff together in new ways. And then moving forward with a team-like approach rather than a more hierarchical structure.
Great, thank you. We had a few questions come in. If we have a quick moment to talk about your vision for taking the university to the next level or priorities in the coming few months. I know obviously this study is one of those.
Well, as I mentioned, I think the timeline is that the study will be completed at the end of September. At that point, I intend to release it to the campus community. We'll discuss what are the principles that are foundational for us to move forward, and then implementing at some point some or all of the recommendations from MGT. But I believe MGT has been very thorough. They've asked for comments, there's been surveys, and they've met individually with leaders across campus to gather information, to compare our structure, our administrative structure with our peers, and to come forward with some clearly defined changes that could be transformational for us. And again, what we've asked them to evaluate is the organization. They're not evaluating courses or tenure and promotion processes or degrees. It's focused on high-level organization, and that's what we'll be discussing.
Are there additional initiatives? I know there are. You're a very busy lady. Are there additional initiatives that you are kind of focused on through the continuation of the next semester, for example?
Yes, other than COVID and of course changes in the SEC, which was a surprise. I think that it's very important that we remember we had an excellent report on diversity, equity, and inclusion that was released in the spring semester. The regions agreed to commit $25 million to that effort, and we are moving forward with those initiatives that were listed in the report. And CJ, you've been working with Frank actually on moving forward with those initiatives, and you know a bit about the status.
Yeah, definitely. Dr. Banks appointed Dr. Ashley to help us spearhead or take those initiatives over the touchdown line, I guess. So what we've been able to do is meet with all the co-leads and determine where we are in that implementation process, and then look at, okay, what additional resources are needed, what additional personnel is needed, then how do we begin to, again, put this to the next level. Dr. McGowan has also been working with us. We met with your team, Christina, to talk about some of the things you all had addressed in your document. So all of those things are happening as we look at where do we take our next efforts with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So anyone else want to mention initiatives that are ongoing?
I think one other initiative that we're working on, our financial aid and scholarship initiative.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, we're looking at how we can better attract our underrepresented students. Quite a few bold initiatives we've been charged by President Banks to look at, thinking outside the box, look at what we're doing, what's working, and how we can be more competitive in moving the needle with regard to students of color here at Texas A&M.
And we're very excited about Aggie Park. I know many of you may know about the new outdoor part of campus in front of the association that will now be converted into a large water feature, a type of gathering space for students, faculty, and staff to be outside with a great deal of greenery and seating areas. We're excited about that. Of course, you've all seen the construction fence that now surrounds that area. The construction will begin immediately. I believe we're starting on some of the drainage issues in the next few weeks, and it should be completed in a year. I'm very excited about that.
Great initiatives. We had a couple of follow-up questions on the commission and just DEI efforts on campus. So someone said, how can the university as a whole be more involved in the implementation of diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives?
I would say reach out to Dr. Ashley. He has been meeting with various groups to understand again what it is that we need to do to keep moving our efforts forward. Once we've somewhat wrapped up the actions that we've been charged to do by the board, we're going to look at, okay, what are the next steps to keep our diversity efforts fresh and keep them moving. As you understand, reports have a timeline and they have a shelf life. We want to make sure that we stay moving and stay aggressive on our diversity efforts because we have momentum. Our regions have supported the work that we're doing. Our president's supporting that work. So we do not want to be stagnant. So I would say definitely reach out to him, share those concerns. And he's been doing listening tours. So he's been out there asking people, what has been your experience and so forth. So definitely do that.
All right, and I want to be mindful of your time. I also want to tell everyone, I know we still have many questions unanswered, and we will certainly work with this group to get those questions answered in due time. Wrap up question, and this is in no way indicative to the performance of our interim roles on this panel today, but what is the timeline for seeing interim roles filled? Is that also dependent on this MGT survey, or?
Maybe it's referring to the dean's roles, their interim roles. And also on this panel too, there
Yes, ma'am.
is in that role. So I anticipate in October, we will be focused on filling these interim leadership positions.
And
I do believe there's always a question about what comes first, the provost or the deans. And so we have to step back a bit and determine what's important, but we understand stability in organizations is extremely critical, and moving forward quickly, identifying a search committee, advertising the position, interviewing candidates. For dean candidates, I would anticipate it would take a year. I would assume the same for the provost position.
And so to understand the chicken or the egg reference, is it the deans that would be the initiative first starting in October, and then a year out from that would be higher level leadership?
Oh, and higher, I would assume that would occur during next year as well.
Okay.
But to fill those positions, it does not necessarily take a year to do so for staff positions. So I think the timeline will be much shorter for filling higher level leadership positions.
So the October was referencing starting opening up the hiring freeze.
No, let me be clear.
Sorry.
We don't want to move forward. I don't want to move forward with searches until I have evaluated the MGT report, because it could mean that we're changing the job descriptions of an individual, or perhaps we change the title for that position. But I want to review the MGT report before I move forward with identifying individuals to serve in a permanent role. So that's why October. Now, with regard to dean's positions, we will start by pulling together search committees for the deans and for other interim open positions in October as well, because perhaps we would get recommendations associated with creation of search committees. So that's why I'm holding back a bit, at least until the report is complete, determine how we're moving forward, and then assemble a search committee, develop a job description for all of these open positions, and then hopefully be fully operational by a year from now in terms of permanent staff.
All right, well, thank you all for joining our talk today. I know it was really quick, and I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the attendees' time. Just a kind reminder to our audience that if your question wasn't answered today, we'll be working on getting answers and posting the recording of today's panel on our website soon. And if there's anything that the University Staff Council can do for you or your staff, I encourage you to email staff@tamu.edu. So thank you all for attending, and to our panelists for participating and sitting in the hot seats today. Have a great day.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you, Christina.